Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
He's Dr. Bob, Alfred University Political Science Professor Emeritus, Dr. Robert A. Heineman, and he's here.
Brian, thank you much.
Syria and Turkey. The president says he wants American troops out of there. The Turks go after Syria. Trump's under a lot of criticism. Rand Paul is a supporter of President Trump on this one. What do you say, Dr. Bob?
Well, I think it is a sad story. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think what we're talking about here primarily are the Kurds. I think what we have to think about here is the way this is being framed. And in terms of our friends, we're allowing our friends, the Kurds, to be attacked by the Turks. Now, I think that is, wrongly framed. And a lot of these senators, Lindsey Graham and some of these others, my goodness, we're turning our back on our friends. Brian, in international affairs like this, there's no such thing as friends. What we're dealing with here are allies at one time or another. And I guarantee you the Kurds, if it fit their purposes, would be fighting on the other side. So the idea that somehow you've got some kind of obligation here in terms of a friendship relationship, I mean, this isn't a social club we're talking about here, Brian. This is international affairs, and it can get very, very nasty. So, and I think the Kurds are going to get hurt here. Again, to fill this out for our audience, the Kurds have a big chunk of northern Iraq, which they seem to be working pretty well with the Shiites and Sunnis in Iraq. That seems to be going pretty well. But they also have enclaves in Turkey, Syria, and in Iran. And I think they have another little enclave over there somewhere. And, of course, what the Kurds want is they want to create their own country, their own nation. That's not going to happen, Brian. These other countries are not going to allow that. The Turks have been fighting with the Kurds for some time in Turkey. And I think they finally got them pretty much either subdued or negotiated into some sort of quiet. But there's always these leaders among the Kurds that are leading them to revolt, to create their own country and nation. It's not going to happen. And so the question here in Syria is, and there are a couple of questions we might touch on, but the real question here is, what's the end game here? And Trump's point is, we got to get out of here. We got to stop wasting American money and American lives on something that's going nowhere. Now we've trained the Kurds, we've given them material, and now they've got themselves in a bind, and the idea that we're going to stay there like we have in Afghanistan for, 17 or 18 years, somehow in the middle of Syria. Actually, they're not actually in the middle of Syria. But that's not going to happen. The fact is, Trump, I think, has a pretty good handle on this, and that's the idea that we keep getting ourselves in these so-called endless wars, and we don't gain anything from it. The time to move is now. Get out. Let those people work it out themselves. And some people are going to get hurt. I don't think there's any question. But the idea that somehow we're going to make, we're going to create some sort of Turkish enclave there and support it for, it just doesn't make sense. So the idea that somehow we've turned our backs on our friends there, I think they've been allies of ours. They've helped us, and they've helped us in other areas as well. But again, in most of these cases, they see us as a way to move toward some sort of country or protected status. And again, it's worked out reasonably well in Iraq. But the other thing that keeps coming up here is that no one will trust us. My goodness, we've been allies to the United States, and now they've left us. Well, let me point out to you that we provided material for the Kurds. We provide them with training. We provided them with military support in various ways. So now they're on their own. The same situation in Afghanistan. 17, 18 years there, we're pulling out. And I think it makes sense to let our so-called allies understand that if they can't take care of these situations themselves, we're not going to be there constantly to be giving up material costs and our American lives for something that's going nowhere.
Dr. Heineman, I saw an article that listed a lot of old Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweets. And all of those tweets were about endless wars in places where the U.S. does not belong and has no business policing the world. And then all of a sudden, now with Trump, she's saying, oh, Trump made the wrong move. He's betraying our friends. We got to stay there. This was a bad move. That doesn't just go for AOC. There's a lot of people doing that.
Absolutely. No, it's an opportunity, once again, to attack Trump. Now, the point is, Trump in his campaign made it very clear that the United States should get out of there. And he's simply carrying through what he promised the American people. And I think he's looked at it and said to himself, this is going nowhere. It's time to pull out of here. So that, the whole situation, and I don't want to take kind of an Obama approach to this, that being maybe blame someone else for everything. But the fact is, this all goes back to Obama's Arab Spring. The idea that somehow, and Hillary Clinton was quoted as saying, Assad has to go. Well, Assad has not gone. And in Egypt, where Mubarak has been a friend of ours, or an ally, for 35 years, we basically supported the revolution that overthrew him, which led to Islamic control for a little while, but now, fortunately, the military's got back in control. But there's still civil war on the Sinai. There's civil war in Tunisia. Obviously, there's civil war in Syria. And Afghanistan is still a mess. But I don't blame Obama for that. But the point is, in Yemen, I blame Obama. The whole idea that we could overthrow and somehow democracy is going to flourish throughout this area has led to us abandoning some of our longtime more authoritarian supporters, and has led to a tremendous amount of bloodshed and dislocation. So I think Trump's absolutely right, and the idea that somehow, my goodness, we've stabbed our friends in the back, I can't buy that.
Dr. Bob, conservative commentators say that the media on the left and Democrat House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Adam Schiff, the California Democrat, are pretending that there's an impeachment going on right now. And the conservative commentators say the media and these Democrats who are going after Trump are depending on the average person's lack of understanding of the process of impeachment, and that they're trying to trick them into thinking there's an impeachment going on because the leadership is kowtowing to the power of AOC and the squad who foolishly want to impeach Trump, which would hurt the Democrats. That's what a lot of conservatives say. What do you say?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, yes. I think Pelosi is walking a very fine line there. She's trying desperately to maintain some kind of control over the Democrat majority in the House of Representatives, and she doesn't want to be in a situation where, in fact, they lose control of the House. And I think to a certain extent, the public is really tiring of all this. Now, I know recent polls show that somehow they 50% or more think Trump should be impeached.
I want to talk about that poll, but yeah, keep going.
I would have to look at that a little more carefully. The question is, should there be an impeachment inquiry or should Trump be impeached? I think we've got to have to make that distinction. But the problem here, and I don't blame Trump and his people for saying, yeah, we're not going to cooperate with you guys. They've already flooded them with subpoenas here, subpoenas there, and I don't know where I saw it. The New York Times or somewhere said, this is a historic expansion or aggregation of executive power. Come on. Trump doesn't have to kowtow to this random bunch of ragtag committee chairs who are going after him. They want to vote officially to engage in an impeachment inquiry. Okay, now we got some sort of legal action here. But we don't, at this point, of course, these guys have a right to oversee the executive branch. That's part of the congressional obligation. But they don't have a right to go charging into the White House and rummaging about every here and there.
They have prosecutorial addiction.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they cannot get out of prosecution mode.
I see.
And they're legislators.
Yeah.
They're not the Attorney General's office.
Well, no, I think not. I think Attorney General Barr has a lot of differences probably with these guys.
On that poll you brought up a second ago, the Fox News poll, 51% want President Trump impeached and out. Some conservatives, not ones that work at Fox News, but others say that on this it's deceptive because Fox is not just polling Fox News viewers, which you might think, and B, while 51% of the Fox News polls wants Trump impeached and removed, only 40% of those polls are Republicans. The latest approval numbers for Trump and the GOP is around 90%.
Yeah, well, that could be. I think this, polls, and the basic issue I would raise here is, are we going to start impeaching presidents based on this poll or that poll? Or come on, let's move along. Now, I do think what's interesting is that I believe President Trump is going on a number of speaking engagements this weekend. Is he not, Brian, or within the next day or so? He's going to be in Minnesota and a heavily Democrat area. And
that I'm unaware of, but go ahead.
Yes, I think so. And I think he's going to be, down in Mississippi, Louisiana, too, endorsing candidates. So we'll see what kind of crowds he pulls and what happens in those elections, which I think are held. I'm not certain. I think they're going to be held Saturday. So we'll see. And obviously he's getting out there, and we'll have to not only we'll see what kind of support he pulls and the effects of his getting the vote out, but also what he has to say. He may be saying some things on the stump that get a little more coverage.
Dr. Heineman, I want you to kind of translate this for me. Not translate it, but explain what she's talking about. Democrat Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii says that the DNC, the Democrat National Committee, and the liberal media are trying to rig the 2020 coverage so that the smaller candidates like her cannot go anywhere. Congresswoman Gabbard says Bernie Sanders unfairly lost in California in 2016 because of the DNC, and the media helped Hillary win that when it was really a Bernie win. Without explaining why, Tulsi Gabbard says the early voting process is damaging her campaign in some states, and Tulsi Gabbard might boycott the next debate. What is she talking about with the early voting damaging her?
I don't quite know how that plays out, tell you the truth.
I know that Assemblyman Phil Palmisano said that early voting in New York State's going to cause a lot of voter tampering and a lot of questionable activity.
Well, here's the thing with the early voting, and I think it's just kind of common sense, and I don't think Mr. Palmisano was wrong. And that is, if the unions, for example, I think have a real advantage with the early voting. They're keeping track of who's voted, and they're going to be on the phones, knocking on your door, insisting that you get out to vote. Now, obviously, they can't control exactly how you're going to vote, but, of course, in most of these cases, they're going to assume that the union members are going to support whoever the union has endorsed. So organized groups like that have a real advantage with the early voting. And the whole idea that somehow it makes it easier for people who can't get in on election day or whatever, I think is really a small part of why they're going for early voting. The whole idea is to get these voters who are in one way or another associated with some fairly well-organized interests. Now, and I think that probably covers some of the minority groups as well pretty well. They want to see that you, in fact, have showed up and voted. So they have, 2 or 3 weeks here in New York State to pound on you to make sure that you end up going to the polls.
You haven't shown up yet.
Yeah.
We have the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's public information, I think. I think
Not how you voted, but if you voted, I think they can do that.
Yeah, well, they certainly can have somebody at the polls checking down the voter list as people come in, and then they're going to be on the phones to you. So I don't know. Democrats already got the state pretty well locked up, but I think it does give them an added advantage, no question.
Biden's campaign.
Yes.
Keeps telling media outlets to stop interviewing Rudy Giuliani about Hunter Biden and stop interviewing Peter Schweitzer on the same topic.
Yes. Now, I think Schweitzer's the guy. Is he the guy that wrote the book on Clinton cash in the Ukraine? Yeah, which is pretty devastating, how the Clintons milked the Ukraine for funding of one sort or another. And, of course, Biden's were tied in with that. No, I think it's a very bad sign for Joe Biden that he's stooped to the point of telling the New York, I mean, when you got to start telling the New York Times and you're a Democrat to stop making you look bad, I think you're in serious trouble. And I think he is. Although I do see where Senator Feinstein in California has broken with Kamala Harris, and she has in fact endorsed Senator Biden or Vice President Biden or whatever instead of Harris. So that's got to go over not very well, I would think. So here and there might be a bright spot, but I think Mr. Biden's in, again, the Trump phone call and some of these other things, people, maybe the House wants to impeach him based on the phone call, but I think a lot of people are thinking, what is Hunter Biden doing? What was it, $600,000 a year he's pulling down from this operation? So I do think tied in with a Democratic race right now, Bernie Sanders has got to be hurting pretty badly too. And I would guess that his support is moving over toward Elizabeth Warren. So she, just by being out there campaigning day in and day out, she's really literally the only one left standing.
Is it going to be her?
Well, I think I would not pass up Cuomo at all at this point. I think we've picked him as the candidate, and it's just a matter of time till the Democrats fall into line here.
Gonna take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about the two Ukrainians. Stay there.
Double L's Shooting Sports in Arkport, formerly Schulteis Sporting Goods, has an amazing selection of over 300 long guns and over 100 handguns in stock. They are also able to help with private party transfers, and they now carry a wide selection of Vortex scopes and a large selection of handgun and rifle ammunition. Stop in, and their knowledgeable and experienced staff will help you find whatever you need. Double L's Shooting Sports, open Monday through Thursday, 10 till 6, Fridays 10 till 5, Saturdays 10 to 4. Phone 607-295-7485. That's Double L's Shooting Sports in Arkport.
Back with Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Alfred University political science fame. Two Ukrainians were arrested hours after having lunch with Giuliani at the Trump Hotel yesterday. They were trying to leave the country with one-way tickets, said one story. The two are charged with campaign finance violations. Their names, and I hope their families forgive me if I mispronounce this, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. Anyway, the two are accused of using a limited liability company to make political contributions related to the U.S. elections. And that's a FEC, Federal Election Commission violation. They don't want contributions from foreign nationals.
They're Ukrainian then?
Yes.
I see.
And both have been linked to Giuliani's efforts to conduct investigations in Ukraine on Joe Biden.
Yeah. Well, that's a violation. There's no two ways about that. If they're trying to hide their, kind of reminds you of what Mr. Noj got himself involved in. But in Noj's case, we're not talking about foreign, I don't think, foreign contributions coming through, but setting up these shell corporations and things, and then trying to hide behind them. That definitely is a violation. And
is the timing interesting?
Well, I kind of wish Giuliani would just go away, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I've always felt that way.
Yeah, go away.
I mean, America's Mayor and all that stuff was nice, but, you've had your time. Bye-bye.
Right. And he just...
he doesn't help Trump.
No, and Fox News has him on every here and there, and I just don't think he adds much at all. But he's hanging around, and Trump hasn't told him to shove off yet, so I guess that's what we're going to be stuck with there.
Anything I did not bring up that you wanted to?
Well, I will say this. I was talking to one of my friends on the phone earlier yesterday, and your concerns about Soros, by George, Brian, there's some truth to that.
Well, I'm not at the Glenn Beck level on that topic, but...
Oh, is that right? Glenn Beck's a big anti-Soros?
He kind of went overboard and embarrassed himself, but why? Well, what are you finding out?
Well, my understanding is that his, I guess it's called the Open Society Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, has poured a ton of money into the DA's race in Monroe County, supporting the Democrat, and apparently did the same thing, over $1 million into the Philadelphia DA race, and elected some liberal Democrat who is refusing to prosecute and throwing out cases. And apparently a couple of the prosecutors and DAs in Northern Virginia had a lot of
Yeah, he does that. Soros does that all over the place.
Soros money. I think there's a little something to what you're talking about there, Brian.
Well, yeah, I mentioned that to you last week about Soros encourages a lot of protests in both the U.S. and England, and you can see on BBC or Sky News and all over the American news.
Well, it's kind of interesting if he's encouraging protesters and then trying to take control of the DA's office in a number of these big metropolitan counties.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of a tough combination to deal with.
Well, you kind of wonder, when you see all these protests and upheaval in England and the U.S., a lot of that is coming from him.
Well,
and his groups.
Certainly somebody's out there training people and showing them how to be nasty. That's for sure. What was that one out in Portland there?
Antifa?
Yeah, Antifa, yeah. Oh, well. We'll just have to stay down here in our quiet little valley.
Yeah, now some of the Soros groups aren't like that. They have an indivisible Hornell, and, they're always friendly to me.
I hope so.